So the group I get a chance to visit with once a month is a group that it was their job to make you watch, make you read, make you listen, and make sure that what they were telling you was right, and that it is factual, and that it made you think, whether it be an opinion or whatever. And that's why I love each month just getting to be in a room with Al Aamodt. He worked at WDAY television for years, editor at KVLY, and a news broadcaster right here, which is the most important work he did as far as I'm concerned, at KFGO. And he taught at MSUM, which I think is probably the thing that he would tell me is the most rewarding. Jack Zaleski, now a columnist with the North Dakota Monitor. And if you haven't seen the Monitor, folks, or read it, you owe it to yourself to find out more about it. The job that Amy Dalrymple and her team do is just amazing. But he writes for them, former editor with The Forum, and he worked at this place called Devil's Lake Journal. Jane Ahlin is like scheduled reading for so many people. Guest columnist for years for The Forum. Taught English at MSUM, which is why I drive her nuts, and an alum from UND and MSUM. There. It's the last time I'm going to give all the whole itinerary, the whole resume here, guys. I want to begin with this because I heard this morning and it just stuck with me. John Meacham. Does everybody love John Meacham as much as what I do? A historian, just
one of the best ever.
Absolutely. He just puts things in such common sense, right? Yeah. So I'm listening to him this morning. And he says, and the debate was about President Trump and that post that he made of himself, where he basically bashes George W. Bush with the whole mission accomplished thing. So he wanted this big dramatic flags in the background because this whole Iranian deal. But John Meacham said it. He said, reality is undefeated in human events. And to me, it was weird because I knew I was going to get to visit with you three today, and it just fit into what these conversations kind of turn into, which is if you bring the truth in, it's going to come out there. Jane, the truth is always going to come out. Fair?
You sure hope so. Every once in a while, you wonder and you wait, and then finally it does. But I would say where President Trump is concerned, that it truly has been a fight to get to the truth, at least to get the truth widely known. Maybe not. Maybe the truth is always there, but and people recognize it. But it's there's so much nonsense and chaos around everything that's said. It takes a while to get down and say, oh, he was trying to make us think this. And when to distract us from this or, anyway, but there is truth there.
I think the worst thing you can do being involved in any sort of publication or broadcast that we've all been involved in is have thin skin. And Al, I'm going to ask you this because there had to have been a news broadcast that you put out there that ticked people off so much your phone exploded.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just happens, but, your only defense, going back to the Meacham quote, is the truth, the facts, and if people can't turn to legitimate media sources and expect to see the truth, well, then we have a serious problem with that. But the biggest problem is, and I would guess you guys would probably agree, is that there's a whole bunch of people who just aren't interested in the truth anymore, or they have a distorted sense of what the truth is. And for the life of me, I will never ever understand that.
Well, and they do, Jack. They buy what they want. And this started, we always talk about Walter Cronkite and the era and the peer journalism and all of that. I'm just going to say it. Fox News, Rush Limbaugh gave them exactly what they wanted to hear. It wasn't factual. It wasn't any of those things, but that's what they were hungry for.
Yes, I think that's true, Joe. But at that time, it still wasn't mainstream. It still was a bit of an outlier. When you have the leader, the alleged leader of the free world, the man who is supposed to be leading the shining city on the hill, speaking untruth routinely, and his entire agenda the entire way he operates and his administration operates to avoid telling the truth. Some people would say he lies. Then you have a problem that's much bigger than what Rush Limbaugh might have done or what Fox News might have done, because you have the most important leadership in the nation, some would say in the world, normalizing lying. And that becomes a problem that becomes systemic, becomes part of the culture, and people begin to believe, naively so, that the truth is no longer important as long as what they believe dominates. And that's what Trump and his gaggle of gangsters have done.
Yeah. What have cell phones done in the area of, I mean, this Meta settlement that we're looking at, $17 billion in acknowledgement by Facebook, by TikTok and others that they were using programming to target kids and to, I'm sitting here and I know a circumstance where I know an 11-year-old who's got a cell phone. Okay.
Sure,
and I think that 11-year-old had to have a cell phone because the other kids all had the cell phone, and we went down that road, right? So here you sit with an acknowledgement from one of the most powerful industries in the world that they were literally targeting kids, Jane. I mean,
right.
They were.
It's not unlike the cigarette settlement, because if you are offering flavored tobacco and the vapes now, the flavored vapes and things, you're out for a young audience. Well, the same thing can be true with cell phones, and because kids, there's such magic in it. I've watched my grandkids when they got old enough to take their parents' phone, which they were pretty young, and start playing games on it, and they could, it's like. This is so much fun. But then when it becomes something where they can be attacked or talked into things that are truly bad for them, then it's a different story.
But the reason I bring it into this conversation is mostly because, Al, it's how people receive the product of news. Right? I mean, when I'm sitting there this morning, and I'm like, I knew about the settlement. I heard about the settlement yesterday, and I'm trying to use it to post and get people talking on social media. This is how I got it. I mean, I'm holding my cell phone in my hand, folks. I'm sitting there in the morning, and granted, I could probably buy a touchpad or whatever, but this is how I get it.
I'm the same way. I know exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I was almost late because as soon as I got home from the gym, I want to take a shower, but I had to check first. What have I missed? What didn't I have on MSNBC or CNN or Fox this morning? And so that's where I can. And I went to the forum stories, for example, to see what was in there. Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Most people get their news from the forum or from the phone. I'd like to tell you a personal story. I took on Monday, I think it was Monday, I took 5 or 4 of my grandkids to Barnesville. I wanted them to learn a little bit about the family heritage. And 3 of the 5 just got phones. They're 6th graders. Mm-hmm. And as we were headed down the road, I said, "Look at the beautiful sky." I said, "Put your phones down. Look at how beautiful that sky is, the blue, and contrasting it with the yellow of the sunflower fields." I said, "These are the things you miss when you stick your head in the phone all the time."
Yeah.
And
So they looked for Grandpa, and then they went back to put their heads in the phone.
No, I took them swimming afterwards. So
okay, well, good. I mean, to me, part of the conversations we have when it comes to this is how people absorb or get the information they need, or instead of the information they want. And those are 2 different things, Jack.
Well, what Al just cited, what he accesses, that stuff's there. The means that it gets to the reader these days is different from ink and a press. But the information is there if they want it. The problem is that the challenge is there's so much more out there that's not good information. And regarding the settlement that was in the news yesterday and today, gigantic, sounds like a lot of money, but for that company it's not. And I think this has a feel of closing the barn door after the horse is gone.
Yeah.
And that it's another example of the technology, for good or ill, outrunning regulation. And we see that all the time. We've seen it as far back as the Rockefeller in the oil industry. And we see it now with IT and these sites that are accessible to young people. We're seeing it with the data center problem. The technology, the business angle, the money that's behind these things is far more sophisticated and advanced and moving along at a pace that outruns the ability of government on the state and federal level to regulate it. And that's where we are now for all these things. And I think that these big companies, Meta and the others, they know that and they play the game.
Well, Bill Gates, Abby always gives me a stack saying, hey, pay attention. But Bill Gates, Microsoft's co-founder, he argued on Wednesday that artificial intelligence needs significant limits. The reason I thought of quoting this article or going to this article is because of what you just said. Bill Gates grabbed the pitchfork and stuck the horse in the keister and made it run out of the barn. I mean, and now he's saying we got to put it back in the barn. And so those two things don't go together. I wanted to bring this up to folks because it is the hot topic. If you stop at any small town cafe right now and you say these two words, you're going to end up with a lot of emotion in the room, and that's data center. These data centers are getting talked about. And of course, if you go to KFGO News today, what you're going to see is a big article on, the tax breaks that the data centers are getting in the area of property taxes and whatnot. There's a lot of experience in this room when it comes to industry and the changing. I mean, Jack, did you see this getting to be as controversial as what it is?
I don't think anybody saw it coming as fast as it was coming. Data centers aren't new. I mean, there are states like Virginia who have been dealing with data centers for years. But a new wrinkle is the speed with which these things are being built, the size of them, the information blackout almost for the public and for an awful lot of local governments that has accompanied this development. And you realize that it's a serious problem when you see states as different as Pennsylvania and Texas. Pennsylvania leans blue most of the time. Texas, of course, is quite red. And the governors of both those states in the last few days have declared moratoriums. Mm-hmm. So this is more than political. It's more than the business community getting its way. It's become a real concern in states where there's been a really intense drive to build these things. I mean, when you see a state like Texas saying, whoop, got to stop now, and when you see a state like Pennsylvania, these are significant places, big states, saying no right now, then I think it's a signal. It's a strong signal that other states, including this one, North Dakota, needs to step back and say,
slow down.
Let's take a better look here.
Well, Jane, I'm going to describe a town that I don't think you know very much about. It's in Dickey County. It's called Ellendale.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a little history there.
A little history.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
I hear they're quite happy down there with their.
And actually, I think a good share of the town is, and there's a significant number who are not that happy. But what they're amazed at is that the stock for these companies has been going up and up and up. And it makes me think of our, the 2008, when everything fell off the cliff with the housing industry. Mm-hmm. And I wonder about these data centers. Can they possibly make the kind of money that would really make real these investments right now in them? Because the money seems to be just unending.
Yeah. Somebody asked me because they knew I'd toured the one in Ellendale and had been involved in all this public discussion. And they said, explain data centers to me. And Al, I said, okay, how many times do you drive by storage units? where you look at them and say, that ain't the prettiest thing in the world to look at. I bought that stall, you bought that stall, and we rented it for the month. That's a data center. I mean, the people that build the data centers aren't the ones that have the data. They're just giving space in it to Google. They're giving space in it to Bitcoin. They're giving space and people to store their crap there is what they're doing.
Well, I think that the issue that Jack raised, back to your original question, it's these non-disclosure agreements that have cast a pall over everything. And it is political. Going back to something else that Jack said, Aamodt saw that what's his competition's name, Jane Ahlin or something like that. And she targeted him and she said we're going to put data centers in here and he's going to let them come in here. Mm-hmm. Well, Aamodt saw what was going to happen, and so he backed off that. It's a very big political issue.
Yeah.
Or you could say, I don't know much about Governor Abbott. You could say he's being responsive to the concerns of his people.
Oh, well,
exactly.
I will say this: if you're Representative Owens out of Grand Forks, and you were the one that made sure they got the tax breaks here in North Dakota, that's not a good campaign issue. I've got Aamodt, Jack Zaleski, and Jane Ahlin in, and we started this basically to just bring people in who reported news, who wrote about news, who just put things in front of folks to make them just be part of a bigger conversation. So we said, let's bring them in here and continue that path. And we were talking about data centers before the break, but how that ties into this group, to me, is, we can debate the issue, we can debate all that, but the way people are finding out about it. And I'm going to go to you first, Jane, on this, because we discussed on the break here a lot about non-disclosure agreements. And so if you live in South Harwood, should you have known about the data center before the announcement came that you had won a data center?
Absolutely. And I assume that the legislature is going to do something about this, because I think even the people who are pro-data center do not like the idea of their elected officials signing agreements that they can't know what the information really is that they need to know because it's in their backyard.
Yeah. Al, I'm going to say this, and you can go ahead and take me to the woodshed. I think the media in this town still is doing a crappy job of covering the data center.
Oh, I think you're right. And one of the biggest problems with this whole data center issue, as far as I'm concerned, is most people don't even know what they really are. Yeah. And how they work. And you marry that with the non-disclosure agreements. You have a selling job to do. The people that are putting these data centers into these communities need to do a public relations campaign explaining what the hell's going on out there and exactly what the impact is. And I know you've tried.
I agree with you on that. I do. But my point is, if they won't, okay, let's just make an assumption that they won't speak to the public, they won't, and then isn't it incumbent upon things like TV broadcast and radio broadcast, and in your case, Jack, shouldn't the paper be sitting there at the mailbox every time they drive by saying, look, answer these questions? I mean, isn't that the job of media?
I agree. And, I'm no longer directly part of local media. So I just want to make that clear. But anyway, again, I get the sense, and I hope I'm wrong about this, that this is another case of the horse gone, and the barn doors trying to be closed now. But the horse is gone, long gone. When you look at the size of the companies that are involved in the data centers, they almost make the oil industry look like little guys. And the money that's being brought to bear, both in pressure on local governments, and I don't know if you've seen the new advertising that's on some of the cable networks and some of the national broadcasts. Very sophisticated ads about how wonderful data centers are, and they make them look like, somebody's opening a church. And so don't underestimate, as we always seem to do in North Dakota, the power of a business lobby that has the kind of money to spend to make its case and to influence people as the data center companies do. It's pretty scary. I don't know if the legislature really understands it, as they didn't understand it when it happened with coal, as they didn't understand it when it happened with oil. So I think that there's a story to be written here. I think that the media, the legitimate media, the people who have the resources to dig into this stuff have not dug deep enough. And maybe it's too late, Joel, and that's my fear.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to get to, Jane. Is the public informed enough, going back to what Al said, people not knowing what it is, what they're living next to?
I think it's hard to understand what a data center really is. But I think when you were explaining it with the idea that, yes, these are these huge facilities, but it's like every cubicle is a different company. That makes sense to people. Mm-hmm. I think there are ways to explain it, and I agree. I have not seen in the media good explanation. And that would be alone, without even getting into the things that might be a little dicier about them. Just that understanding. I'd like to see the pictures, folks. What does this look like? And we all hear, well, it's cold here, so they need that because they can keep their engines cool, so to speak. But it's I do not think the average North Dakotan has any idea what a data center really is.
So much of the coverage, just going back to your original question, if I may, so much of the coverage is centered around the controversy over these things, the conflicts. The Minneapolis Tribune did some very good reporting on the conflict in Hermantown, I think it is, Minnesota, where there's a data center that was proposed for, and what was going to happen with the beauty of the wetlands there around there. The New York Times, and I brought in fact, I brought a number of the stories to you and Abby a few months ago of what was going on in, I think it was Virginia, Kentucky, a couple of the southern states, as it relates to these data centers. So there is reporting out there. It's just really, really hard to find.
Jack, you've been using the narrative, the horses out of the barn, and I agree with you. I think, though, that the way the data centers themselves have handled this with the media, with the public, they're going about kind of a build back our reputation as a good, corporate citizen and as a good neighbor. They're running those ads. And
after the fact. Yeah.
After the fact. And they've already made a lot of enemies out there, Jack. They have.
Yeah, and they're trying to fix the image. But fixing the image really isn't the issue. The issue is how much influence these mega companies with unlimited resources have over states like North Dakota. And by that I mean by elected officials, local officials, zoning boards, et cetera, like what happened in Harwood. You think of the situation at Harwood. We knew about it after it was done. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't build a building like that without months of planning, without lining up contractors and engineers and all the materials that have to go into a building as gigantic as that thing is. Suddenly, the equipment was there. Harwood was struggling and arguing with themselves about what to do and why we didn't know this, why we didn't know that, the NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements and all that. But it was a done deal. And within weeks, they were digging and building.
Yep.
And so
weeks being the key word there.
That's the kind of thing I think that legitimately should upset people because it was done in a very stealthy, secretive way.
If you're in Oliver and Mercer County, in North Dakota right now, you go to these public meetings, there is so much emotion at these public meetings that you wish they weren't conducted with that much emotion, that you could do kind of a conversation like we're having now, but you can't help the fact that it's doing it.
It's in their backyard, it's their way of life, it's their home.
They've got close to 600 people in Mandan, Jane, that are sitting there trying to get their point across. I don't think out of that 600, I don't think 10 of them came to find out before they formed their opinion. I think that they already had their opinion when they went through the door, Jane.
Well, that's very well true. I think North Dakota historically has had a problem because we have been the boom and bust kind of place. And so when we're offered another boom, it's grabbed at, and I don't think you hear a lot of elected officials saying anything that's wrong with the data centers. I really don't. It's like when suddenly we were really rich with oil, and indeed we were, and it's been amazing for what the money that has come out of it. But I think our attitude is, well, goodness, if we are either boom or bust, and we need to grab onto this, and we need to be just going along with it until well, then maybe it's gone, and I guess then we'll have to worry about some things. I mean, I just think it's a North Dakota attitude that goes way back.
In the late 1990s, somewhere in there, Kent Conrad's press secretary was a good friend of our family, Lori Bader. A lot of you know Lori. But Lori called me and said, I can't get there at last minute. Kent's going to need a side person at these public meetings. In those days, that was called security. And so she was looking for a young man that could maybe take a punch. And so you bet, I'll have Kent's back on all this. He went into these public meetings, and there was, again, going back, there was so much emotion. I forget the issue, what the issue was even, but he handled it. He went into those, and he took all those slings and arrows and all those people mad. And by the end of the meeting, they had all calmed down. They had all gotten to this point where they felt that they had got their questions answered. And unless the data centers start doing that, there's going to end up being more misinformation out there about them.
I agree.
Well, it is. I think it is interesting that our congressional delegation has not been, upfront or leaders on this issue. Mm-hmm. They may have put out
on anything.
Well, but on this particular issue, they have not been speaking out in a way that would be meaningful. They may have put out a press release or something that I don't know about, but they have not been in the forefront of representing the people of North Dakota regarding what is a major, major change in the state's economy.
But I think, Al, it can be about perception. The way we've been running data centers on this show, I am perceived as being against data centers.
Oh, no.
I don't think, but there are people who are like, I know you're against data centers. I'm like, that isn't what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get information out and have a conversation about data centers, Al.
That's it. Well, and that goes exactly back to my point, that people don't know what they are. They want to know what they are. So, to your point, reporters ought to be asking more questions, but B, the data center operators ought to take the time to inform the public of what's going on. Or, and this goes to something that Jack said, maybe they just don't care. We're here, we're in business, screw you.
Yeah, but the one thing that's going to come back to haunt them is a reputation. The world is so small, information-wise. And so what Oliver and Mercer County are doing spreads into Walsh, spreads into Stark, spreads into pick your county, McLean. I mean, all of these counties are watching from afar. And that's just in my state. Yesterday I went to Duluth, and I was visiting with some great people in Duluth over the last 2 days. And the one thing that I found from them is they're talking about data centers. They are. It's the issue going into this fall's campaign. So going into this year's election, the President of the United States has decided, and he went with this last night, he spoke to it this morning on Fox News. He's talking about how the Republicans do the best when he's on the ballot. And looking at the numbers, it's hard to argue that he's wrong. It really is. I mean, the Republicans have won more races when he's on the ballot. And so he's on this campaign to tell Republicans to turn out to vote as though he's on the ballot. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that in Maine, for example, Susan Collins has requested he don't be in Maine.
That's what she said very clearly.
Right.
So which one of those two are right, Jane? Which one of those scenarios? Because one's on one side and one's on the other.
Well, I'd say both are true, because there are states you see in South Carolina. He definitely swung that. Excuse me, Lindsey Graham's sister, and in other states he seems to be really pulling people along. But the Susan Collins of the world, they're in a state that doesn't like Trump. They like her. She has stayed popular because she's been middle of the road, and she does reflect. I mean, Angus King, it's not a state that is a southern state.
Yeah.
That's going to be all red, and that it's going to.
And the other thing that happened recently, yesterday, day before, is this business with Canada and the trade stuff. You've talked about that on the show.
That was my 10:05. Trust me, I was going to suck you guys in on that.
I'll tell you that is working in Susan Collins' favor when you look at how dependent and what a good relations Maine has had as trading relations with Canada, like North Dakota has. And so this, in the Collins, you almost have to look at these races state by state and see what's driving the voters in those individual states. And in this case, I think Trump's Trump's foolish fight with one of our strongest allies, who's always been side by side with us, no matter where we are, one of our biggest trading partners, if not the biggest. Is not trending well in states like Maine.
No, and I had a gentleman named Steve yesterday that called in that threw a lot of facts and figures out there, and it was basically nationwide. And I told him, I said, I doubt that New Mexico is doing a lot of trade with Canada on soybeans for the hogs up there. I mean, I get it, but in North Dakota, we're going to pay a price for this. Let's get to this. We were talking about Canada before the break, and we were talking about, picking a fight with allies and neighbors. And Jane and I were going over some of these numbers. North Dakota exports $287 million in services to Canada. Just services, financial services, travel, those type of things. In goods to Canada. Fuel oil, $3.9 billion. Crude petroleum, $1.2 billion. Beverages and alcohol, $228 million. I can keep going down the list, but you guys are smart enough to know what the products are. But Al?
Minnesota.
Yeah.
5.5 billion to 5.6 billion goods exported to Canada each year. 24% of the state's total exports. Imports, Minnesota purchases nearly $13 billion worth of goods from Canada annually. 65% of those imports consist of energy, including natural gas and electricity. And it is absolutely beyond me why we pick a fight with our neighbor.
Why do we care what language they speak?
The problem is again, because this president is a transactional buffoon when it comes to international affairs. He gets irritated because the Canadians don't say unkind things about him. Of course, he deserves unkind things about him. He says unkind things about the Canadians. And so he has the power to do a stupid thing like these tariffs. And the Canadians are not going to sit still for it, as they're not. And who's paying for it? Everybody around this table will. Everybody who wants to build a house, everyone who wants to buy some lumber, everyone who wants to buy a car that's got aluminum in it. That's who's going to pay for it, not the president.
Right. And you've got people who are going to benefit politically for taking him on in Canada versus people south of the border. Our delegation will lose politically with him if they had the courage to take him on this trade issue with Canada.
That's a contradiction in terms. Our congressional delegation and courage. That does not go together these days.
But Jane, they fear him.
Yes, they do. And probably nothing was sadder this last couple days, but seeing this nonsense about Lake Ontario becoming Lake America or something. And then our former governor, who knows how much money we need, the tariffs, how bad they are for North Dakota, is in there applauding Trump and just helping him move. This is terrific. It's absolutely not only nonsensical and embarrassing to the state, but it is really, I think, kind of criminal for us.
The problem with Doug Burgum always has been, and I thought he'd be different. I'm not trying to pretend I didn't encourage him to run for governor at a time when I thought, both parties needed to have a check and balance. But the problem with Doug always was he never, ever walked by a mirror without looking in it. I mean, he loves Doug Burgum, and so this fits right into his wheelhouse. But I want to go back to, I met John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy, and I had just this great conversation. I think the man, the Republican, conservative, but I was talking to him in an airport because I just walked up to him and played the Heidi's my sister card. And then he had all the time in the world for me, right? I'm not afraid to play that card when it helps. But he said that the biggest, and he said this on media, it wasn't during our conversation, but he said the biggest weakness that Donald Trump has is that he says what's on his mind. He said everything that pops into his head, he says. And then the next day he'll change it, right? But if you're going to lead the free world, it might make you popular with 35% of the population. But if you're going to lead the free world, if you're truly going to accomplish something, Al, you can't say everything that pops into your head.
Well, no, but he's not known for his tact at all either. And that's one of the things that I think has exacerbated this dispute between the United States and Canada. Canada's not taking any crap from him. Yeah. Period. The premier has stood up to him and just, I've forgotten what his name is right now.
Arnie.
But yeah. He stood up to him and basically said, we're not going to put up with this. And in fact, one of the provincial leaders told him he could kiss his butt.
Yeah, we have that sound if you want it. Abby rolls her eyes at me because she had to beep out. All I wanted was the one word to be used as much as what, Ab? Can you play him the beeped version? Can you do that for him? Because this is what the head of Ontario said.
It's a Canadian. We don't have to beep Canadians, do we?
Yeah, but his last name's Ford. They do a little bit business with Ford. But again, no fear. And politically, he is stronger than he's ever been in Ontario because of it.
Of course.
So take a listen to this.
You sound a little more subdued than you did this morning on the radio when you said Donald Trump could kiss your ass. Did the Prime Minister tell you to ask you to tone it down a bit?
No, he didn't. I'm not going to comment, but he wasn't against that. And I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass. We're not playing his game. Folks, we're an economic powerhouse. Make no mistake about it. He says he doesn't need Canada. I'd love to see, he wants to take our auto sector. I'd love to see him run cars without any oil. He ran on creating more jobs. Last time I checked, jobs went down in the U.S. and Ontario created more jobs.
And that's leadership. Now, granted, the language,
the language is spicy and good for them.
Yeah.
But the problem here is it's Canada, a country that historically, from nearly the beginning, has been as strong an ally in foreign affairs, in going to war, and in trade than most any other country in the world.
Yeah.
And he picks on Canada because they don't because they see who he really is and say so.
Well, and they're using
and he cozies up to the dictator of North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I want to get Susan on with us. Susan, you got a question or a comment?
It's more of a question. I thought the Supreme Court had said no more tariffs. So is he just going to break the law because he's got this immunity, or what the heck?
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. The question he had or they had were in relation to states. But she's right. She's absolutely right in the sense that he doesn't follow what they say anyway.
Yeah, well, the court has put a hold on the tariffs that he had put on previously. And they're trying to find a way to get the money back and all that sort of thing. I don't know if that court decision, which is being implemented, applies to the new tariffs. Maybe that has to be a whole new round.
Wasn't there a timetable, a certain number of days, like 90 days or something? That was part of the deal, if I recall right.
But let's go back to one small issue. It's a small issue because whoever wins the next election is going to take it down anyway. But he wanted his name on the Kennedy Center.
Oh, God.
He changed the board. He did everything he could. And the mission was to get my name. He's like, well, the board decided, not me. They just, okay.
It's his board, and he's chairman of the board.
Exactly. And so the Supreme Court rules, you can't do that. It was set up this way. These are the rules. The family, you legally can't do that. Now they had to take it down, but they put a big tarp up. Now what are they doing? They're putting their name back on the Kennedy Center. So going back to what Susan asked us, I mean, Jane, the truth is he's going to do what he wants to do anyway.
Well, with the Kennedy Center, didn't he even make a threat that he'd just tear it down? Because if he can't have his way.
That came through his lawyers. I think from the Justice Department said that. You're right.
Then he said it's in such terrible shape physically. And that wasn't true. I mean, that just simply wasn't true.
No, I just can say in the last decade or so, taken 3 grandkids, each of them alone, to Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I absolutely had to do was get them to the Kennedy Center. And with our granddaughter, it worked well. We saw Beautiful was playing then. Well, when our first grandson that we took, it was an opera that was playing, and that was the only thing that it could be for an 11-year-old. So we went to the opera, and afterwards we're going back in the car, and he said to me, "Grandma, you know, if I knew that the world was going to end in 2.5 hours, I'd want to be at the opera." And I said, "Oh." And then he said, "Because that was the longest 2.5 hours of my life."
I like this kid. I like that kid.
We were talking before the break about trade with Canada. I can tell you there's a lot of ranchers listening to you three right now. A lot of people out there that know what it's like to run a cow-calf operation, know what it's like to fix a fence in the middle of the winter. They're not happy. They're mad. This Argentinian beef coming in and the way it was handled, the way it was sprung upon them. I don't know if you're hearing from them, Jack, but nationally this is getting some attention, and maybe somebody buying a pound of hamburger at a grocery store is happy, but the ranchers that listen to us aren't.
No, and there was a story in, I think, today's forum that talked about that, where they talked to the cattle producers and some of the representatives of the cattle groups, the stockmen and whatnot, and they're very circumspect, but you could tell they don't like it. Don't forget, these are people who, overall, I would think, if you looked at voting patterns, voted for Trump. And this is coming around now, and they're getting their hamburger thrown in the face with Argentina and with other places too, I guess. So in some way, there's kind of what goes around, comes around. And the idea, most economists, most food economists who look at this say that even with bringing that beef into the country, it's not going to make a significant dent in food prices, in beef prices anyway. So if they're mad at them, well, that's nice. At the ballot box, you might think about that next time.
Well, I will add this, and I'm going to throw this at you, Jane. The Argentinian beef had been in before,
yes,
and recently, and it was bad. And it didn't get inspected. The Food and Drug inspectors have been fired, a lot of them. And the ones that felt the USDA inspectors, and they're like, look, you're not letting us do our job. So a bunch of them have quit. And, I know I only have a minute to have you speak on this, but, do you think it'll be safe?
I think it's, well, first of all, I think it is a mistake to do it. But no, I don't think it's like all of the things we're having trouble with in the vegetables right now and things. There is not the examination or the, a certification of all these things. And the beef would be certainly even worse than what we're dealing with lettuce and bean sprouts.
Would you, how in the world wouldn't you support country of origin labeling?
I cannot imagine why anyone would not. And back to what Jack had said earlier, why does our delegation not say we need country of origin labeling?
Well, the North Dakota stockmen, they get mad when I say this, but they said we have it. It's voluntary. I want to know it. I want to flip that. We'll talk some more. Dan, you're on with the group here.
Yeah, good morning. Say, I just want to clean up a couple of things there about the beef. We've always imported beef because we need that lean beef to mix with our hamburger for the grind. That's why we're not getting we're not importing any the big cuts, the steaks. We're just doing hamburger. The other thing is this is all about the election. Now I'll step back. I have full confidence in our inspectors. Now, true, they have been hamstrung because we've laid so many of them off. But that's not their fault. They'll continue to do a good job. So that doesn't bother me. But to me, this is all about an election. This allows Trump to come out and say, okay, Mr. Consumer, I cut your beef prices. And then he's going to come back and say, okay, Mr. Rancher, I'm going to give you a check so you feel good.
Bingo. Yeah. Bingo.
Dan's got this nailed.
That's where the problem is. And if we don't go to the polls in November with that in the back of our mind and vote accordingly, then there's no way out of this, because they're just going to run amok.
Thank you, Dan. It's a $40 trillion problem, what Dan just described. Wow. The national debt is $40 trillion right now. And that, both parties, that lays at their feet. It does. I mean, that isn't just the Republican Party. That's my party's been undisciplined when it comes to a lot of those issues, too. But Dan's spot on right.
But didn't we? Well, two things. First of all, I want to tell you the interview that you had with Mr. Meyer, I think it was a couple of days ago.
Oh, Dean, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was just excellent.
That got picked up all over the state.
The Dean Meyer?
The Dean Meyer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great.
No,
Great.
I thought...
I tried for Shirley and I settled for Dean.
Fair enough.
He'll be texting me in about 2 seconds.
I really learned, I think I really learned a lot about that. But going back to some other question or comment rather.
Can I interrupt you one thing before you say that?
Of course you can. Sure.
During that interview is when Dean brought up that the lean beef had been going in from Argentina and Brazil and other places and being blended in Texas because they had fats there. And so going back to what Dan said, that's true. They know that's true. This just wasn't planned. This wasn't, and it's being sold as though the cow-calf is down so bad. And of course, they said it was caused by Biden, that cow-calf. And it's like, now you're telling the ranchers they didn't know. Well,
Dean, when he talked about how it was the drought that was actually the root of the problem,
yeah.
And
but go ahead, Al. I interrupted you.
Well, that's okay, because I just wanted to tell you, I thought that interview was really good. And the other thing is, what's the deal with Brooke Rollins? Why wouldn't she? Why wouldn't she say where this imported meat was coming from?
Well, it goes back.
You're talking about the Secretary of.
The Secretary of Agriculture.
It could be she didn't know.
Well, and then what did she say? It was part of the trade deal, and then she threw another guy under the bus. I've forgotten what his name was. That she said he was responsible for working this deal out.
Yeah. I think we have the clip that you're talking about. Let me see. We're going to see live together.
Okay.
What specific countries have been in talks with the U.S. about stepping up those imports, aside from Mexico, which you just detailed?
I am not privy to talk about that. I think the conversations are still going on, and that's Ambassador Greer, who's finalizing what exactly that looks like, and I think the president's involved in that as well. Thank you.
I rest my case. The Agriculture Secretary doesn't know what the hell's going on either.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
give me a break. I
just got this from someone near and dear to me, where she points out that paychecks are falling behind prices yet again. And so this comes from Steve Ratner, who does a fabulous job of actually showing facts. But okay, she must get mad at me at times because I use her as an example, but she's the perfect example because, bright, young, does an absolutely fabulous job. 29 years old and doesn't own a home yet. And that's you, Ab. I mean, that's part of what's going on, right?
Yeah. And I know that there are incentives like the first-time home buyer loan. It would have been better had someone else won the presidency. There would have been more incentives. But yeah, interest rates are only going up. And if it was like just the home loan interest rates, it'd be one thing. But your entire cost of living is going up. So your gas prices are going up. Also, your electricity bills are going up and the groceries that you buy. So it's like, okay, if it was just one of those, then maybe I could afford the house. But with all of it together, the cost of living is expensive.
Yeah. And Ab, you're also going to find out, again, not in large part, but in significant part, because of the tariffs, that if you wanted to build your own house or if you were buying a house that was built on speculation, the basic price of the house plus the interest rates you mentioned is much higher than it needs to be, in large part because of the tariffs, because we import an awful lot of building materials from Canada.
There are 16 different types of plywood that would be coming out of Canada that won't go into your new house.
Yeah.
Andy.
Well, into the same thing, you could also then argue, okay, buy a cheaper fixer-upper home. Okay, yeah, totally see it. But now all the supplies to fix up the home are going to cost twice the amount. So then even that's not an affordable option.
There was a guy on one of the network newscasts who had a hardware store or lumber yard, and he held up a 2x4.
Yes.
And he said this 2x4 last week was $5. Now it's $11.
Yeah.
$11 for a 2x4.
Well, think of things like a pound of nails.
Yeah.
Steel. So it's ridiculous.
Aluminum.
It's crazy. Aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum. Let's get to Dean. Dean, you're on with the trio here. Go ahead.
Hi, Joel. I want to get back to the AI Center for a second.
Great.
We're a consumer society. Look at our trade deficit, and we know that we import more than we export. We have the power, if we don't like AI centers, and it would be a hard pill for us consumers to do, but, like the Montgomery bus boycott, you could boycott these purveyors of all sorts of stuff that are coming through devices. They're called phones still, but there's a whole generation that doesn't even use it as a phone. Yeah. So if you wanted to get them to rethink AI, take a month sabbatical from using your device.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean.
Dean, that's an interesting scenario, but given the way the world in reality works today, I can remember, and so can you, I'm sure, and the people around this table can remember when we weren't carrying phones around. It's not that long ago. But now, will you ever, any one of us, be without that phone for one reason or another?
Well, I don't know if a person could be.
You can't be, because the system has evolved in a very rapid rate, so that you need that phone for a lot of different things besides, playing games or whatnot. So, that's like, I don't know. It's just the kind of change that is so woven into the fabric of the economy and the culture that you're not going to go back and not using it in the way of a boycott. I don't see how practical that could be.
I go back to Allendale, though, because that's home for me, too, in many ways. I managed the rural water system there. Right. We had an office there, just on the edge of my legislative district. But in Allendale, there are so many positives that aren't talked about enough. And maybe on this show, they're not talked about enough. But it wasn't done all right. And that's because it wasn't discussed ahead of time. If it would have been discussed ahead of time, I've had conversations with one of the individuals that lives close to it, former county commissioner, had great conversations with him. I go back to you, Jane. There was no communication. And when you do that, if I build a great big house next to you in Fargo, that's 5-story, and you don't get to see the sun come up in the east anymore, and it's 10 foot from your lot, you're not going to like me.
Right. Yes, I'm going to question that permit for sure. Yeah. But in Allendale, again, I think you're right on. It is a mix, and nobody really knows how it's going to come out. Very hopeful. I think still most of the population of Allendale would be very hopeful. But it is not coming at a zero cost, that's for sure, on community life and on things that are, that the people value.
Jane, she never had an enemy in the world.
She did not, and it's kind of amazing. And I think so much about her because it didn't occur to me that my daughter, and granddaughter, but my grandsons, my sons-in-law, everybody knows Dolly Parton. Yeah. Everybody loves her. But I think and I think it's been talked about quite a bit, but I don't think you can emphasize enough that she knew how to be empathetic and kind without ever ceding her own will. She knew how to make herself what she needed to be. And it did not matter, as the stories come out. And she knew how to make fun of herself, of course. So that's fun. I don't think there's a better quotation anywhere than when they said something about, did she worry about being categorized as a dumb blonde. And she said, well, no, I know I'm not dumb, and I know I'm not blonde.
I love the quote of Abby and I were talking about this yesterday, but the whole, it takes a lot of money to make a person look this cheap. But think of the lives she changed, through just making sure they had a book. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jane, just think of the lives she changed.
I would just add in her, she managed to make her few years of upbringing into a life story that always was new. She could retell it. But this whole idea of getting involved in literacy, I think was just stunningly smart. Yeah. And our own 58102 gets books from her imagination.
Mm-hmm. I remember Christina Hine Landon. She is now with the United Way. When I was at WDAY, I think that was the first time that this book donation, if you will, had happened in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and Christina explained how beneficial this program was. Compliments of Dolly Parton. What a wonderful philanthropist, though. Yeah. That she did so much for so many people and really never asked for anything back. Now, I'm not a country western music fan at all, but
she got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame too.
I know that. And that's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. But it was just that she was, as a human being, what a wonderful person to want to emulate.
Well, you mentioned you're not a country fan. When I heard her do Stairway to Heaven, when I heard her sit there and do Stairway to Heaven, one of my greatest rock and roll songs ever, and she's breaking down all these barriers. And, I maybe didn't like the way she did it, right? But which I actually did in the end.
Well, and I suppose you could say that her biggest hit, one of her biggest hits, "I Will Always Love You," is not a country western song. It's just a universal ballad, a universal song that I think resonates with an awful lot of people.
Did you hear the story about that? That the singer,
Elvis one,
Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston.
Okay.
That she was Dolly was driving someplace, and she heard the Whitney Houston song for the first time. Heard her doing it. She said she had to pull over and catch her breath because it was so powerfully well done. And she said, I never heard that song done like that before.
She said that one of her biggest regrets was not doing that song with Whitney Houston because she loved to do duets.
Yes.
Oh, she did it with Belinda, Brandy Carlisle.
Yeah.
And I saw it on the news and I just, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And then also, she did a Neil Young song after the Gold Rush, which I sent you, with Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris. And they did some albums together. And that's another one. If you haven't seen it, my God, you should see it.
But I'm old enough, and I was a little kid, to watch my dad watch Porter Wagner.
Yeah, that's where I first saw her on Porter Wagner, where she'd come down on that half moon thing. Remember? Uh-huh. And I'd look at her and I'd say, "What? This is a phenomenon. Look at this person." And she can sing, and she got this look that's just almost bizarre. And then, of course, she becomes what she eventually became, which was, far more than an entertainer, entrepreneur, business person, a developer in Eastern Tennessee. Her philanthropy is amazing. An actress. Some of the movies she's in, she's delightful.
Right. And she really is a feminist in the very best way. The whole 9 to 5 thing. Uh-huh. The lyrics, they just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. She spoke in her songs, but she also spoke in just the way she lived her life. That you can be a woman, you can choose to not have children. She chose to not have children and was very open about that. You can choose to be in philanthropy. You can do all these different things because you know who you are.
Yeah, I loved her quote as, now a lot of things come out that maybe you missed, because you can't absorb all of it. And I loved her quote when they were trying to put her in a box on individuals that are trans and trans bathrooms and all of this. And, and she wasn't going to let them suck her into the politics. And she just looked at him and said, hey, if I got to pee, I'm going to pee.
But Joel, what you just said was so spot on. Why are we honoring her so much now? Why didn't we, as a society, do that when she was alive?
Yeah. Well, we lost her quick.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that she was even sick was a surprise. That sick. I mean, she had canceled a couple of concerts or delayed some things.
She'd been you hadn't heard from her for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd been a pretty good while.
But it's still, to me anyway, and it still was when it was announced, I said, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
there it is.
For me personally, if somebody would have told me that we'd lose Whitney Houston before Dolly Parton,
Right.
that would have surprised me. I'd made the argument against that. So I'm glad, Jane, you came in here and said we're going to talk about this. So thank you for that. I appreciate it, and thank you to all three of you. It's fun. We're gonna do it again next month, and people really enjoy it.